Welcome to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schloe. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. This is your go-to podcast for all things residential assisted living. I'm your host today, Dr. Alex Schloe, and I am an Air Force veteran, a family medicine physician, an investor, and the co-founder of the RAL Room Assisted Living Mastermind and Open Range Capital. Now, before we get rolling on this podcast episode, let me just say that this episode is for informational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Of course, I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. So always talk to a licensed provider when it comes to medical care. Today, we are diving into something every operator and investor in this space should know: the top 5 chronic conditions that most commonly lead seniors into assisted living, and what you need to know to support those residents. So why does this matter? By 2030, all 77 million baby boomers will be of retirement age, and many of them already are. About 4 in 5 adults over the age of 65 have at least one chronic health condition, and nearly 70% have 2 or more. For families, that's often the tipping point. When the daily care becomes overwhelming, they look for support, and increasingly, they turn to residential assisted living homes. So let's break down 5 of the biggest chronic conditions that we see and what that means for a care environment like ours. First is going to be Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. There are over 6.9 million Americans that are mostly 75 and older who are living with some form of dementia, and we see that number continuing to rise. 2 in 3 of these are women. And what's happening is that Alzheimer's dementia causes brain cell damage from abnormal protein buildup. This first affects memory and then personality and then eventually impacts physical function. This is really important because in residential assisted living homes, you might need to turn to more of a memory care focus when it comes to these dementia patients. And oftentimes they're going to need some higher levels of care and/or supervision. This is because residents may wander. They may forget basic safety habits and get easily agitated. So they're going to need routine, secure environments and trained patient caregivers who oftentimes have some specialty training in memory care or caring with residents for dementia. Next is going to be Parkinson's disease. Now, Parkinson's disease does have a dementia component, but we are going to focus on Parkinson's disease as a whole. So this affects nearly 1 million Americans, mostly diagnosed after the age of 60. And this became quite famous after Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all time, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. What's happening in the body is there's a loss of dopamine producing brain cells, and this leads to tremors, slow movements, stiffness, balance issues, and oftentimes a flat affect and potentially some personality changes. This is really important to know and be aware of when you're caring for residents because the fall risk in a patient or a resident with Parkinson's disease is quite high. They often need help with dressing and eating, and that's largely due to the tremors that they're experiencing. And eventually, they may need help with walking and communicating. There are medications like carbidopa, levodopa that must be given on time, and timing is everything when it comes to these medications. Now, we're not going to dive too deep into the specific treatments of any of these conditions, but I do want you to be aware of some common treatments that you may come across when you're caring for these residents. All right, number 3 is congestive heart failure. This affects over 6 million Americans. And again, we are seeing the number of residents with congestive heart failure increase dramatically. This is actually one of the top causes for hospitalization for seniors, which therefore leads to one of the top reasons why seniors need to be admitted into a residential assisted living home. Basically, quite simply, the heart either becomes weak or stiff depending on the type of heart failure. Oftentimes, this leads to either fluid backup into the lungs or fluid backup throughout the body. So, commonly, you'll see seniors with congestive heart failure, especially if it's poorly controlled, have swelling in the legs, in the belly, and they need aggressive diuresis, or essentially, they need to urinate off that extra fluid that is pooling in their extremities, that is pooling in their belly, and sometimes pooling in the lungs that could cause pulmonary edema. It's really important in these residents to make sure that you are watching for shortness of breath. If the heart is not pumping blood as well as it should to the lungs or throughout the body, that can lead to swelling, as I mentioned. And so, if we get swelling in the lungs, we're going to see that as shortness of breath. If we get swelling throughout the body due to poor ejection fraction or poor heart function, we can see swelling in the lower extremities most commonly. So it is really important to monitor for any swelling in these residents. And homes should offer low sodium meals, do daily weight checks, and there needs to be caregiver training on some subtle signs of fluid overload. Oftentimes, that is called orthopnea, or essentially the senior is going to lay back and they can't get comfortable. They can't breathe because of gravity affecting edema or swelling in the lungs. And so they prop themselves up with pillows in order to have gravity have less effect and that fluid to pull more towards the bottom of the lungs if they're fluid overloaded so that they can breathe a little bit easier.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but let's be honest. Most real estate investing right now, it's either buy a fourplex or try Airbnb and hope for the best.
Yeah, we're not here for that.
We're here to show you what we believe is the most overlooked high cash flow real estate strategy in the game right now. You guessed it, residential assisted living. It's literally the one place in real estate where you can net six figures on a single home and feel like a decent human being at the same time. You're helping sweet old ladies eat pancakes and play bingo and live longer through better care. You tell me what's better than that.
So, we're hosting a free live webinar called How You Can Create Financial Freedom with Residential Assisted Living. No fluff, just value. And it's happening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 Mountain Time. No excuses. It's online. Put on sweatpants. We won't judge.
We'll break down why residential assisted living is the best opportunity right now, the 5 steps to take down your first home, and how to set up a business that makes a real impact and real money.
Spots are limited. So don't be that person who DMs us in 3 months saying, wait, is it too late to start?
So hit up theralroom.com/webinar and register now.
Be the hero your grandma already thinks that you are.
We'll see you there. Pancakes not included.
Again, we also talked about the peripheral edema. So checking to see how much swelling they have. If that's pitting, when you push onto the legs, do you see a divot form? How long does it take for that divot to go away? That is all some signs that you can look for when you're monitoring. Of course, the daily weight checks are going to be helpful because that fluid weighs a significant amount, right? Picture you have extra fluid throughout your body. And so when that happens, when we see that swelling, when we see that pooling, we'll see their weight trend upward. So, hey, what is their baseline diurese, meaning they are fully diuresed, they've urinated out as much fluid as possible. They're euvolemic, or essentially where they need to be in terms of a fluid status. That's their base weight. And then you want to make sure you're checking their weight and seeing, hey, do we see any signs of increase in their weight that may be a sign of fluid overload? All right, let's go ahead and move to number 4, and that is diabetes. Most commonly type 2 diabetes, and that is affecting nearly 1 in 3 seniors in America. So nearly 1 in 3 seniors have type 2 diabetes, and those complications that can exist increase dramatically with age and with glucose control. So insulin resistance, so the insulin that the pancreas is secreting, is not as effective at decreasing the blood sugar, and there's resistance throughout the body that's going to lead to high blood sugar, and that can damage the eyes, the kidneys, the nerves, the immune system, and make you more likely to have a heart attack or a stroke. So it's really important to make sure that diabetes is managed appropriately and that blood sugar management needs to be consistent. And in these residents, meal planning is critical. We want to make sure that we have a good idea on what we are providing these residents for meals and make sure that we are controlling their blood sugar well so that they don't have any further damage to their organ systems. Staff should also make sure that they're monitoring for hypoglycemia. That's low blood sugar. A lot of our insulin medications or even our GLP-1 agonists can cause decreased blood sugar. That decreased blood sugar can cause hypoglycemia or an overall low blood sugar, and that can cause confusion and even mimic dementia. So if you have a resident who's confused, it may be a good idea to check their blood sugar, especially if they're diabetic, and see if they have any hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, which may be causing that confusion. That is easily reversible by giving them some sort of sugar. All right. Number 5 is COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In fact, there are 16 million Americans that have been diagnosed with COPD, and there are many folks who actually have underlying COPD that has not been diagnosed. And this is strongly linked to smoking history. However, you don't have to smoke to have COPD. So there are some residents, some Americans who have COPD and have never smoked a cigarette. What happens is that the airways get inflamed and they get narrowed. They are obstructed chronically. And so seniors will struggle to get air out, which causes trapped air, actually, which leads to fatigue and frequent lung infections. And so it's really important to see, are your residents having any signs of shortness in breath? And what's important when you are taking care of these residents is you want to ensure if they need supplemental oxygen that it's used correctly and safely. Okay, this is usually a pulse oximeter range or a pulse oximetry or a blood oxygen level of approximately 88 to 92% actually is what's recommended, because too much oxygen in COPD patients can actually be toxic and can make them worse. So make sure you're following any recommendations from the resident's physician in regards to this or in regards to any potential oxygen use. Also, keeping the air clean in the home using some sort of air purification system can be really helpful to help limit triggers and limit potential COPD exacerbations. And making sure they're on some sort of walking program and getting exercise can be very helpful to keep the lungs strengthened to help prevent any COPD exacerbations. If someone has pretty severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, they may need a little bit of extra assistance with their ADLs at a slower pace to avoid some of that breathlessness. Be cautious when it comes to taking care of these residents and be understanding that they do benefit from some exercise like a structured walking program. But if they're having an exacerbation or if they have severe COPD, they may just need to go at a slower pace than some of your residents. So just be patient in that regard. These 5 conditions, dementia, Parkinson's, CHF, diabetes, and COPD, account for a huge amount of chronic conditions that our residents will have and a massive percentage of assisted living admissions. And while the medical side is incredibly critical, the environment is also very important. Seniors are going to thrive when they're in a safe, beautiful, well-designed home, surrounded by people who genuinely care for them. In the RAL Room Assisted Living Mastermind, we are helping folks create a home that you'd be proud to have your grandma or grandpa live in. And if you're interested in learning more about that, you can book a completely free discovery call by clicking the link down in the show notes, or go to theralroom.com and you'll be able to find that as well. So I am Dr. Alex Schloe, and thank you for tuning in to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. Let's continue learning how we can provide better care to seniors, one home at a time. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is theralroom.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the RAL Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.